Welcome to the To Be Frank Show with Zacc and Strack. Frank Zaccanelli has been in the world of domestic and international business and professional sports for 40 years. And as a former minority owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, he's been asked to comment on current events and national news for most of his professional career. Sarah Strackhouse has worked as a reporter, videographer, graphic designer, anchor, and producer at Fox News, CW, CBS, NBC, and Time Warner cable stations across the country for more than 12 years. And no matter where she landed, her search was for the truth. In a time where journalistic integrity has come to be questioned, people are looking for a place to find just the facts.
From Dallas, Texas, welcome to the To Be Frank Show, the second season show. I don't know, Sarah.
33 maybe?
Something, but we're basically on Mondays and Thursdays, and today is going to be a really busy Thursday news day.
Very busy. And I know we say that every time, but it's just every time. We have so much to choose from.
There's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah.
And so we're really excited about the show. Sarah, why don't you tell everybody how they get to the show?
So on Facebook, at To Be Frank Show, and then on YouTube, just search The To Be Frank Show, and then also you can visit us online, tobefrankshow.com, and of course on all of your streaming platforms, Spreaker, Spotify, Google Play, Apple iTunes, Google Store, basically anywhere that you can get all of your podcasting services, we are there.
Yes, and so really from kind of an introductory standpoint, Sarah, the elections were really interesting on Tuesday. There was some really, really good stuff that happened.
Yep.
There was also some, stuff that happened that we're going to talk a little bit about. There wasn't a whole lot of controversy, which I thought was really a good thing.
I think so, and there weren't a lot of calls for audits, which I was actually surprised to hear.
Now, your home state, New Jersey, I think there's going to be an audit, though.
I thought about that. I think it was a really, really close race up until the end. I mean, I think they're going to end up having one, but I expected more calls just across the country.
Now, New Jersey is one of the few states, though, where there's not an automatic audit.
No.
So you have to call for it.
You have to call for it. And the biggest thing about this one was also the first time that a Democratic governor got a second straight term in New Jersey in 44 years.
Since the 70s.
That's crazy.
It is. And we're happy to announce that there's a new mayor in New York City.
I wish we
Let's
had a round of applause.
Billy de Blasio is finished for the time being, and we're going to get into this in just a second. But Eric Adams, who's a former NYPD captain in the police force,
Yep.
I'm really excited about this new mayor.
I think so. He seems to have a good track record, and hopefully he'll put the money back into the city where it needs to be put. I mean, crime has risen so much since the defund police movement kind of swept through, especially in New York City. So hopefully he'll be able to put the money back, clean everything up, really get the city back to its former glory.
Well, this nut job, and he's a nut job, okay?
De Blasio.
No, he's a nut job.
Yeah.
He now today filed papers to try to become governor. Let me just say this. If the Bellagio in Las Vegas is listening, okay, if you're listening, put up a line. You got to make the line 1 billion to 1, but I'll be out there and I'm going to bet this thing, okay? There is a better chance of anything that you don't think there's a chance of. I could come up with 16 things and try to be funny, but this is a disaster for this guy. He now thinks he can be governor.
Yeah.
He was the worst mayor in the history of mayors.
But somehow people voted him in. Somehow people must have liked him somewhere.
Before they knew what he was all about.
He
wrecked one of the top 10 cities in the world.
Yeah. Well, people are acting out right now. I just saw a video of, all the sanitation workers right now are on strike because of the vaccine mandate, and trash is not getting picked up. So I saw people taking to the streets and taking trash bags. Now, in New York City, it piles up quickly. Taking trash bags and tossing them to the mayor's mansion over the fence into his yard.
Mayor Adams, we're going to be a big fan of yours, but there's two things that you need to do immediately when you get into office. One, refund what they defunded out of the police. You got to refund that and get rid of these ridiculous mandates in your city.
And
get
clean
rid of
the
them.
mansion of all stink of de Blasio.
Well, I mean, that might take several trips.
Yeah, probably.
So,
several sweeps through.
San Francisco, our good liberal friends up in San Francisco. And anyone again who knows my background, I did a huge project up there about 10 years ago. They have decided now, Sarah, that children between the ages of 5 and 11 are not going to be mandated to get the vaccine, but they're going to be mandated to have the card that says they got the vaccine to go to the grocery store.
I don't understand this. That just does not seem logical to me. Kids 5 to 11, they've talked about the risk when it comes to outweighing the benefits, or the benefits outweighing the risk. And we broke it down on a couple of shows past about how many kids are actually falling sick from COVID that do not have pre-existing conditions. I mean, I just don't understand this.
It's just, Sarah, it's another indication of the uber liberal Democrats. Now, my Unplugged is going to be about the Democratic Party because there's two parties.
Yep.
There's no longer one party.
No, it's the extremists.
Right, and I'm going to talk about that. But in San Francisco, they're part of the extremists. They're part of the uber liberal, really, crazies.
Yeah.
And to do this with the children, you can't even now bring your daughter or your son that's in 3rd or 4th grade to the grocery store without showing a vaccine card.
I mean, Amazon's just going to get more money.
This is just, but I mean, it's insane. It doesn't make sense. No. There was also, you want to talk about some crazies, okay? People looked at this positively. I'm going to give you the negative. There was a vote in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to actually completely shut down the police force and make it a public safety force. I think that was the term. It got defeated 57 to 43. Here's my question, Sarah. How in the hell did 43% of the people vote to think that was a good idea?
I was just about to say, how is that so close? Because a lot of these services, instead of police responding to a domestic dispute or a domestic violence dispute, even if it comes in that domestic violence is taking place, if someone calls and says, I hear fighting, whatever it is, that means not only are police are not going to show up, but someone who is trained in the mental capacity or mental safe, I can't remember what they called it, but it was like safe mental health capacity will be going and trying to remediate the situation. And I don't think that, I mean, maybe a person should come along with a police officer, but I'm sorry. If there is some sort of domestic dispute going on, I would want a police officer to show up.
Well, come on, Sarah. I mean, but this is what I feel terrible about Minneapolis. It's really a cool city. In the summertime, it's really cool. I spent a reasonable amount of time up there. The problem with the whole scenario is that 43% of the people thought it was smart to do this. Everybody on Fox and CNN, this thing was defeated and it was defeated soundly. I don't think that's soundly defeated.
I'd be a little nervous if I lived there. What's going to happen the next election if things get more extreme? I mean, I don't. And I fully believe in local elections. I think they're so important. Even in my, where I voted personally, I voted on Tuesday, and there were only propositions. It wasn't, that we weren't voting for anyone in office, but they're so important because things like that can pass if you're not paying attention.
Yes. And talk now about the new, I think, superstar in the Republican Party, Winsome.
Yes, Winsome Sears.
Winsome Sears,
yes.
Lieutenant Governor of Virginia.
She has the coolest background. First off, she's a former Marine.
Well, and
so she's a veteran.
And she just said, I love the country, so I'm going to be a Marine.
Yes.
How about that?
Yeah.
After she went to law school and had 3 kids, I think.
Unbelievable. Like, literally just continues to serve her country.
Was she a Marine after she had the kids?
I don't know when she was a Marine,
but
I know she has 3 kids. She's married. She has, went to law school, all of this stuff. She's the first female and the first woman of color to hold the office. That's awesome.
See, that has to scare the living daylights out of the progressives. And you saw the way they treated her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They I was almost going to say a bad word. They literally unloaded on her about holding a gun. No, my mother would not be happy.
No,
sorry, Mom.
If you
I didn't
swore
curse.
on air,
Yeah. But she was born in Jamaica. Like I said, served as a Marine. Just has this incredible background. Why are the leftists, the liberals, not standing up and shouting for this woman? Because that's kind of their big platform.
Because you don't understand.
Because
this
she's
is
conservative.
the antichrist to them.
Yeah.
In terms of their movement.
Yep.
Here is this beautiful African-American woman from Jamaica.
Yes,
correct?
Jamaica, yes.
Jamaican woman that's now an African-American woman that now is a lieutenant governor of a big state.
Yep.
And that scares the living hell out of them.
Yes, yep, it does, because it doesn't speak to their agenda.
Ah, well, I got a feeling that we're going to get into some discussion and the agendas are going to be changing and hopefully changing for the good.
Yeah.
You know, because we're going to get into some stuff today. I don't ever want to come off, Sarah, and I know you don't either in this show, like we're biased against teaching children about ethnicity.
Ethnicity, about kindness.
Did I say it properly?
Yeah. Ethnicity. Yeah. Ethnical studies.
Ethnical studies.
Yes.
Okay? So that's really important. It's probably more important than learning about Italians and Irish people. That's important.
Yeah.
But to the African American community.
And the minority community.
And I would like to be able to see things in the schools that help kids understand the plight of some of the people that haven't been as fortunate maybe as they have. Mm-hmm. But what I don't want, what I know no one wants, is having a third grader come home and say, Mom, I'm responsible for all this stuff.
Right.
He's not responsible for any of this.
No, not at all. He wasn't alive when it happened. I mean, that part of, and now we're kind of getting into the critical race theory conversation, but CRT, in theory, I think could be taught, like you're saying, with the plight of people who were in those situations being taught how we need to continue to move forward and progress. I think if it were taught like that in schools, but a lot of times, unfortunately, it's not. And like I said, I was speaking to someone who lives in Virginia, and her daughter came home and she had watched a video of an 8-year-old white boy apologizing to the 8-year-old black boy for the sins of his ancestors and just apologizing. And that, I don't think that
You know what I'd like to
inclusivity.
see? I would like to see the 8-year-old white guy and the 8-year-old black guy have a discussion about things.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to see.
Well,
no apology. Just have a discussion about, hey, tell me about your family, or hey, tell me about your family.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's where we could get to.
I also think it's really tough. An 8-year-old is still learning the basics of life. I think it's really tough if it's not taught correctly at that age.
Well, CRT, I think, based on this latest election, is pretty much almost dead in the water. So we're going to keep an eye on it.
We'll find out.
All right, let's go to live news.
So we kind of covered a little bit of the election, Virginia and New Jersey. So those were the two big races that pretty much everyone had their eyes on. We just said that the AP reported that the first Democratic governor to get the second straight term in New Jersey won in 44 years, Phil Murphy. And then Glenn Youngkin defeated Terry McAuliffe in Virginia's gubernatorial race. Youngkin was the first Republican to win statewide office in 12 years. And Terry McAuliffe was going for his second term. And you've said this a number of times. Virginia is one of those states where you can't run consecutively.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know, anybody who watches the show, I know Terry. Terry and I grew up in the same upstate New York City. Went to rival high schools. Mm-hmm. Terry McAuliffe is a really, really nice guy, and he got a really, really bad break, I think, in a lot of this. He made some mistakes. Mm-hmm. In the debate, Sarah.
Yep.
You know, he should have reclarified that the next day. I didn't really mean that. Mm-hmm. You know, what I hope is that parents and the school board can work together.
Right.
You can't completely cut out parents, but you can't have parents also, you know, doing A, B, C, D, and E. I mean, there could have been a creative way to do it.
Yeah.
What I'm afraid of is that, and I'm going to get into this in my Unplugged, the Democratic Party has moved so far to the left, it's leaving people like Terry McAuliffe. Mm-hmm. I know Terry. Terry is a Bill Clinton disciple, mm-hmm. okay? Bill Clinton, under every single way you would gauge this is a very conservative, moderate Democrat.
I was about to say a moderate Democrat.
A moderate Democrat. But Terry, unfortunately, got, I believe, pigeonholed. The Biden administration is not doing well. I mean, that is the understatement of all understatements.
Yep.
And Glenn Youngkin, to give Glenn Youngkin the credit that he deserves, he ran a very smart campaign.
And capitalized on maybe a misquote.
Well, let me ask you a question. This is important. He managed the Donald Trump thing in a way that he didn't alienate Donald Trump, but he didn't put him in the middle.
Played it right.
Yeah, and see, that was, I think, very skillful. Terry, unfortunately, and I'm speaking for me, I'm not speaking for Terry. I haven't spoke to him about any of this, but he was forced to bring Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and all these people.
And Obama, I believe, even visited.
Obama is a plus.
I was going to say, people loved Obama. I think
he's a plus.
Yeah, with Biden coming in.
He's a plus.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm going to talk again about Obama in my Unplugged, but Barack Obama's not the problem.
Right.
Joe Biden and his administration is the problem. Everywhere you look, it's melting down. And I think that caught up to Terry. And I know that, you know, he's going to be the poster boy now for a lot of people saying, oh, wow, look at what he did.
Right.
Look at what happened here. I think people have short memories. I don't think Terry's career is over. I think deep down, he's got to really sit there and say, you know, the Democratic Party in general didn't do anything to help me.
Yep.
But more importantly, they didn't help me, they hurt me.
Right. And I think you're kind of right on the money there with the separation. Unfortunately, there's two beasts now in this Democratic Party that he's not going to get the support from both sides. So he's pushing, what is that? Pushing the boulder up the hill. He's fighting a losing battle.
But the progressives are going to wreck their own chances
Yep.
to do anything. And I'm going to get deep into that. But, you know, as it relates to the New Jersey governor's race and the Virginia's governor's race, no matter what they say on television, no matter what is said, you know, in the press, that's got to scare the hell out of the leadership in the Democratic Party.
Absolutely, because it's said that essentially these two elections set the pace for the next presidential election. And it's interesting that it's one on each side, and both were close, relatively close races.
Yes, but before the presidential election in 24, you got the 22 midterms.
Right.
That's even bigger.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll see. This will be good to follow.
All right.
Yeah. Well, our next story, inflation rate versus wage growth. So Biden did a misquote, and I think we should start with the video. It's a little bit long. I do want to warn you, it's about a minute 45, but the reporter asked the question, and then President Biden answers it in such a roundabout way. I think we have to show the whole clip.
Yeah, okay.
Well, you mentioned the word inflation there. You recently said you have no short-term answer to bring down gas prices, but as you know, it's not just gas prices now. Rents are up. The cost of everyday items are up. Inflation in the U.S. is at a 13-year high. So when specifically should Americans expect those prices to come down?
Well, look, first of all, the significant reason why prices are up is because of COVID affecting the supply chain. I mean, I know I'm not trying to be instructive. I know you know this. Number one. Number two, if you take a look at, gas prices and you take a look at oil prices, that is a consequence of, thus far, the refusal of Russia or the OPEC nations to pump more oil. And we'll see what happens on that score sooner than later. Number three, I think if you take a look at what we're talking about, if you look to this coming Thanksgiving, we're in a situation where we find that we are in a very different circumstance. Last Thanksgiving, as I said, this year we're working on a supply chain issue. But last Thanksgiving, I sat down with my wife, my daughter, and my son-in-law. This Thanksgiving, we're all in a very different circumstance. Things are a hell of a lot better, and the wages have gone up higher, faster than inflation, and we have generated real economic growth. It doesn't mean these dislocations aren't real. they do affect people's lives.
Okay. I'm sorry for the longness of that, but it was important that you heard it all. But his last statement is the key statement. Wages are going up faster than inflation. Joe, that's not right. The statistics are very clear about this. Inflation as of today is running at about 5.4%. It's the highest that it's been in 13 years. Now, to date myself and take everyone back, I got out of college in the late 70s. And when we were all moving in, all my contemporaries were moving into the job market, they used to post the misery index on TV. And it was the addition of the inflation rate, which was 13% and change, and the interest rates, which were 18%, and they'd come up with the misery index that was in the 30s, okay? And you would see that every night on television. I've lived through that. We've had to deal with that. This 5.4% is bad, but it can get a lot worse. Now, the FOMC, the Fed Open Market Committee, basically in April said that they thought that inflation was going to be somewhere in the 4.2% range, which shows you exactly what's happened from April until today. Now, the misinformation by President Biden comes from the fact that every place that I've looked, the employment cost index is where I went to this, but it's everywhere. Wages are growing at about 4.3%. So if you have inflation at 5.4% and you have wages that are growing at 4.3%, that's an inaccurate statement, Sarah.
Right. And they're not corresponding to each other. And the growth over the past few years has shot up astronomically. And like you said, it could just keep continuing to grow. Can you talk to people about some of the main factors of what drives inflation up?
Well, it's really supply and demand, right? So what happens when you go into your grocery store and some of the items that you shop for are not there, right? The prices are going to go up because it's a commodity. You know, commodities like lumber and concrete, that's what's driving the housing industry right now, where prices have gone up 40% through the roof. So what happens in these inflationary times is goods rise because it's a supply and demand issue. Some of that is blamed and should be blamed on the coronavirus, there's no question, but some of it are on Biden's policies.
Right.
You're the energy person because of your husband. You know, we shut down pipelines and we shut down drilling. That has a lot to do with this inflationary scenario.
We went from being energy independent to depending on OPEC, and Biden keeps blaming OPEC, but the biggest problem is we now depend on them again.
Well, and there's two things that I just want to kind of close this out with, and then you could comment, Sarah. Both his Fed chair person, Jerome Powell, and his Treasury Secretary, Yellen, have both said, buckle up. You know, this inflation is not going away. You remember, now I'm going to take you back a little bit, though, for all you Republicans that are opening up the champagne bottles. Trump used to go like this with his hands, that the coronavirus is just going to go away. This is, what are we worried about? This is just, and he would go like this with his hands, okay? So for all of you that think you're throwing a party on the Republican side, on this side here, a lot of this has to do with the fact that Joe just doesn't have any credibility in things that he says, and unfortunately, neither do his staff people or guys like Pete Buttigieg and these people. They just don't have much credibility left anymore.
Well, and it's really sad that, I mean, we listened to that CNN town hall that he did a few weeks ago, and if you wanted to look back, and we kind of went through the fact checks from CNN. Frank kind of broke it down in his Unplugged, broke down all of the interviews, and so much of what he said was just completely inaccurate. And this is the same thing. You should be able, in theory, to believe what the president says, at least when it comes to a breakdown of numbers.
And we would like for our elected officials to just tell the truth, but it doesn't happen.
Right.
On one hand, the Donald, okay, basically would make stuff up. I almost said a bad word. Make stuff up.
The same word that I almost said.
Because he just made it up. He just sounded better. Unfortunately, there's a difference here with Joe Biden. Joe Biden says things, but he's not informed.
Well, I think the thing is, Joe Biden is not necessarily exaggerating or saying hopeful or wishful things.
Correct.
He's saying inaccurate numerical information, inaccurate basic information that the president should know. I mean, he should know the highest tax bracket.
And we're not, no, but we're not even covering this today because there's so much stuff. But this $450,000 payments to the illegals, he says that's garbage. I don't know anything about that. Comes back that the ACLU says, well, if it's garbage, your Justice Department is negotiating on it.
Right.
And they said in the article this morning that Joe Biden just isn't informed. How many more times are we hearing this?
Or he just forgets because he has his cheat sheet in front of him half the time, and we've seen the photos, the videos of him having this paper in front of him. I mean, it's just
I got my cheat sheets right here. Just read them.
One job.
All right.
All right, moving on. A really sad story out of Afghanistan. Frank and I have committed to not letting the completely botched Afghan pullout die. That story. Unfortunately, a lot of families now in Afghanistan have started to hit an even worse lifestyle than they were before. With the Taliban in power now again, not only are families suffering, but they are in the whole country, and specifically the provinces in the middle, are struggling now with economy. And Afghan families are having to sell children.
Do we have a tape on this?
We do, and it is very sad
Let's
to
just
watch.
start.
So,
let's just start off with it. It is sad to watch, so we want to let you know that if you haven't seen it, and then we have some pretty poignant things we want to say about it.
Parwana's family moved to this camp in Baghdis province 4 years ago after her father lost his job. Humanitarian aid and menial work, earning $3 a day, providing the basic staples to survive. But since the Taliban takeover 2.5 months ago, any money or assistance has dried up. And with 8 mouths to feed, Parwana's father is now doing the unthinkable. I have no work, no money, no food. I have to sell my daughter, he says. I have no other choice. Parwana, who dreams of going to school and becoming a teacher, applies makeup. A favourite pastime for little girls, but Parwana knows she is preparing for what awaits her. My father has sold me because we don't have bread, rice and flour. He has sold me to an old man. The white-bearded man, who claims he's 55 years old, comes to collect her. He's bought Parwana for 200,000 Afghanis, just over $2,000 US. Covered up, Parwana whimpers as her mother holds her. This is your bride, please take care of her, says Parwana's father.
You know, and I watched the rest of that video, and you see her struggling and her mom pushing her towards, you know, this man, and it's so sad to see that this just happened. The family had already given the 12-year-old up just before then. This family specifically lived in a displacement camp in northwestern, I hope I'm saying this right, Badghis province, and they were basically surviving on humanitarian aid. And then basically getting a few dollars a day, but it was enough to pay for what they needed to in their town. And after the Taliban came in, it's just gotten completely harder. There is no work, there's no humanitarian aid because they're not accepting any aid. And the Swedish and Pakistani ministers warned over the weekend, they said that that the whole Afghanistan country is going to fall into such a state of chaos and economic collapse that it's going to affect the international community very quickly if something isn't done.
Well, Sarah, this is one of the saddest stories maybe that you'll ever do. Mm-hmm. There's nothing about this that's professional, and there's nothing about this business-like.
No.
This is sickening, okay? The young girl's name is Parwana Malik, mm-hmm. and she's 9 years old. Now, I want everyone to think about that. Their kids, their grandkids, their neighbors. She's 9 years old. Let me give you an unbelievable stat. Months ago, this family had to sell their 12-year-old daughter so they could eat. And if you ask me, this is one of the biggest eyesores. And again, Biden blew it. He blew it. There's not even a debate. At the same time, Trump wanted to get out too. Got to balance this out, but he didn't do it the way that Biden did it. There were conditions. But leaving Afghanistan is turning out, Sarah, to be one of the most horrific problems that have been created now from a humanitarian standpoint, I think, in the last 100 years. I mean, this is becoming, and don't forget, we have 450 Americans still there, outside of all of the friends of the Americans that helped us be there for 20 years. Afghanistan's economy is collapsing. And this is the first thing that's going to happen in any totalitarian regime. This story is sickening, and we just sit back now and we not only do anything about the 450 Americans left behind, we don't do anything about this. And you know what? This is an eyesore for the world.
It really is. And I think one of the biggest things too is that area where it's a displacement camp. So they were pushed there to begin with. That area does not have any vegetation. And if you look at the landscape, I mean, they show it in other spots in the video. I mean, there's no place to grow plants, to grow food, grow basic necessities. So it's just this terrible situation, and the Taliban is not accepting aid.
They don't care about these people.
No, and they're not accepting.
They don't care if they live or die.
Right, and there's so many people who are willing to help, and they're just not allowing any of it. And unfortunately, like you said, more than 400 American citizens are still there, plus all the allies that we promised we'd bring home when we didn't. So it was a complete mess up in my...
All right.
Speaking of a complete mess up, there is a video, social media erupted on Monday, a viral video of President Biden looking like he was taking a little bit...
Hold on. Looking like...
Okay, I just want to say, maybe...
Well, so are you just trying to like...
I'm trying to play it correctly. Okay,
he was sound asleep, Sarah.
He looked like he was dozing
sound asleep.
But maybe he was meditating, trying to play
meditating.
Who knows?
He was snoring.
He was
out.
He had to get woken up by someone.
He was out. This guy was out.
But it was at open speeches at the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference. And I want to roll the video really quickly.
Which would have put me to sleep to start with, because it's a bunch of garbage.
But for someone who says that is the greatest threat, they tell the Pentagon that climate change is the greatest threat to America, and then you're snoozing through it?
Well, I explained that the last show, and I'm going to explain it this show. It's not even in the top 3. Roll the tape.
This conference is one of the most important meetings in history. You have the chance to make decisions and reach agreements which will affect the lives of generations to come. You are in a position of extraordinary power. You can change forever the trajectory we are on. You can make a world that is once again full of hope, not fear. This is my message from Earth to come. On behalf of We the 15, I ask you, please help us to guarantee.
I'm sorry, but this is our president. I mean, the 78-year-old man can't remember facts,
soon
doesn't
to be
answer
79.
questions, soon to be 79, is snoozing during the greatest threat to America. I mean, step out and give this guy a nap.
All right, so let's really get serious about this for a second, though. Okay, we had our laugh about this, but this is pretty serious stuff.
Yep.
You know, Joe just doesn't seem like he's up for the most difficult job in the history of mankind. This is being president of the United States. You know how I know this? Take a look at all the presidents of your lifetime in a photo and how they looked the day that they got inaugurated and when they left.
Yep.
I mean, this is one of the most taxing jobs in the history of jobs.
In 4 years, sometimes 8 years, I mean, the change is unbelievable. The only one who didn't change much was actually Trump.
Well, you know why? Tanning salons and hair coloring.
And I feel like he was so...
This guy was in tanning salons more than a a supermodel.
But I also feel like he was also just so high stress in general. This job was probably just another walk in the park for him.
I mean, he would have like orange eyes sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I know we all like to poke fun at that, but he was probably already so high strung. He just seems like that as a person that this job was probably along the same lines.
Okay, but here's the deal.
Biden is not up for this.
No, he's not up for it, guys. He's not up for it. We're not trying to be political. He's not up for it. But I would just say this, for all the enemies around the world that want to get to the United States, this would embolden me if I was an enemy to say, you know, I'm sorry to use this quote, but it's a standard quote. He's asleep at the wheel. So,
I mean, talk about Sleepy Joe.
all right.
I mean, it's just the other thing. I mean, that's exactly it. I was thinking about it recently when I was watching this story about the Taliban, the previous story, and you know, they were the ones who were responsible for the 2001, you know, planes hitting the World Trade Center. And I just think about it now. If I were them, they're back in power in Afghanistan.
They have an open border to come through.
They have an open border to come through, and Biden is not exactly an intimidating figure, you know, going to show. It's unfortunate because, and you said this last time that I think really resonated and probably resonated with people who voted for Biden. It was not a vote for, it was a vote against.
And I'm completely convinced of that.
Yep.
I am completely convinced they voted against somebody instead of for somebody. I think that probably a lot of the Americans that did are sitting back saying, watch out what you wish for.
Yep.
Because he just, the eye test is everything for me. He does not look like he's up for the job. He does not look like he is up to speed on the details that it would take to run the country.
You know, I have a question. Do you think people regret voting for him?
I don't know about regret because they hated the Donald so bad. And the Donald did everything he could to make people not like him.
Yeah.
You either loved him or you hated him. In politics, Sarah, that was Hillary Clinton's biggest problem. You either loved Hillary or you couldn't stand her. You gotta get rid of the negatives as best you can, even though people don't love you.
Right.
They can't hate you.
Yeah.
When they hate you, you become a very difficult person to get elected. And so that's the real thing that we're dealing with. Joe Biden, everyone looked at him, well, he's like my uncle or my grandfather. And
he's likable.
He's likable and there's no issue. The problem is, getting elected is easy, not easy, but it's easier than actually governing. You have to govern, and he's not governing.
He's being told what to do. He's not, you know.
He's not governing. So, you know, he's your president. He's duly elected. If you're inclined, you should pray for your president, okay? Because he's running the country. We don't need another major meltdown.
And people need to pray for the country.
I think for sure. But the other side to this thing is, though, is that we're so divided and so separated that at some point now, maybe these new elections, they've got to bring us together.
I hope so.
The road that the progressives are and were going down is not the road for the United States of America. It just isn't.
Nope.
Okay.
And speaking of, on Wednesday, Nancy Pelosi put back the paid leave provision in the president's social spending bill.
What do you say? How do you call that one? Tone deaf?
Tone deaf, yeah, I would say.
Is that the word you would use?
Yeah, I would,
Okay.
absolutely. Even her own party, Manchin was talking about how shocked that he was that she was doing that.
Manchin was on with Brett Baier last night. And I knew he was coming on, so I stopped what I was doing. I turned to Fox and I watched it. I have a little bit more respect for Manchin based on that interview. Now, one of the things with Manchin and Sinema that they don't understand is any amount of money now that we're spending without a plan to figure out, you know, how we not only pay for the money, but the $29 trillion and growing in debt.
Right.
And I'm going to get into even more of a problem with our social programs in terms of Social Security and Medicare. Those things are so underwater, it's unbelievable. So I'm going to get into that in my Unplugged. But I had a little bit more respect for Manchin, that he really thought through these things and really said to himself, you know, this doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. And they were putting a lot of pressure on him.
Well, and I think he's coming from a standpoint of logic, where I think it seems to me, obviously I can't speak for the Speaker of the House, but it seems to me that Pelosi was just coming for this as almost like a spiteful move. Yeah, an act of spite, essentially.
Do you remember last show when I mentioned, and I said, the Biden administration gives me the impression and the feeling that they only want 4 years. They know they're not going to get reelected, so they're going to do whatever the hell they want, and they don't care about the numbers. Pelosi falls into that category. Here's a woman that served her country for a long time. I don't line up with her on anything.
Right.
But other than the fact she's Italian, I'm Italian. That's about it.
Yeah.
But she basically is 80 years old. 80.
Yeah.
And you just have to look at her and say, what are you doing? And do you even care about what the polls really? If I was 80 years old, I really wouldn't care. But you're not helping the country, Speaker Pelosi.
Well, and
you're not helping the country.
She's so out of touch with the American people. I was thinking about, was it 2 or 3 years ago when she said that $1,000 for each family was small peanuts or small potatoes, and she just completely out of touch with the American people. For a lot of people, $1,000 is a good amount of money.
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, you know, I've talked to people that are living month to month, and 25 to 30 extra dollars at the gas pump every week
Makes a difference.
That makes a big difference. And you know what? You can't forget about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but Nancy Pelosi, I'm sorry. I don't get it. There's no explanation. It's not going to pass with any of the stuff that she's putting in there. Everyone talks about the infrastructure bill. My only point is we can't pay for any of this, just so everyone's aware. None of it until we get our financial house in order, which is going to take a hell of a lot more than what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah. All right, time now for Double Take. So this first story, a transgender student this is out in Virginia. On Monday, juvenile court judge Loudoun County found the transgender teen guilty of sexually assaulting a female student in Loudoun County High School. This happened back in May. So just for clarification, the transgender teen was a biological male student. And this year, a sweeping rule went into the school system that said that students could use the bathroom to which they identify, not their biological sex. So the juvenile court judge just found the transgender teen guilty. The issue, one of the biggest issues that students and parents found was that the school board had actually covered it up, had not investigated the situation. This transgender teen switched schools and did the same thing again.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So the take here, your thoughts on what happened?
Well, no, I mean, it's a disaster. I mean, my thoughts are this is a disaster. And I'm not against transgender people if they're truly transgender, right? If someone was really transgender, would they go into a bathroom and sodomize a female? I mean, I don't really know a lot about it.
Yeah.
It's a problem for me all the way around.
Yeah.
Just think about if this is your daughter,
Right.
this is your niece, this is a family member. This is really, really bad stuff. And this whole thing about passing a law, if they really want to do this properly and they're really committed to it, get a third bathroom.
Right.
Okay? I mean, I'm so sorry, but I mean, this person does not belong in there with biologically female little girls.
I could not agree more. And I think the bathroom bill in general that we've seen in a number of states, I mean, North Carolina just had a big story about it, I think last year. In theory, if people were all perfectly good people, there were no bad people, then I think there wouldn't be an issue with anyone using any bathroom. You know what I mean? There would not be creeps. There wouldn't be anyone trying to sexually assault anyone. But unfortunately, people like this exist. And again, if you believe you're a different, you identify as a different gender, you're transgender, that's up to you. But I think, and that's your business, and I have no problem with that either. But I do think that forcing everyone to be okay with the cross bathroom use, I think that is completely unbelievable because of people like this who essentially give a bad name to transgender people all over.
Well, let me give you a data point that is probably one of the most important data points here. The father of the first girl goes in front of the school board to protest, goes crazy. Do you know what the school board does? They arrest him for disorderly conduct. The father got arrested in the school board. Now, if he was going up trying to grab somebody by the neck, that's one thing. It doesn't sound from, he was just screaming and yelling at the school board. Now,
I watched the video and they got in each other's faces, but it's not like he, again, exactly what you're saying. It's not like he was punching or anything super violent. It was just, it was a heated discussion.
well, let me ask you, I mean, is that insult to injury in your mind?
Yeah,
I mean-
absolutely. I mean, if that happened to me, I could see my dad doing the exact same thing and worse.
Well, it just, I don't know. You know, this whole Loudoun County School Board thing, you know, let's go back now. You got to remember there was a letter from the school, a school board. I don't know if it was Loudoun County.
The National School Board Association.
And it went to the Justice Department. And the Justice Department opened up an inquiry.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, the school board people said, no, we really shouldn't have characterized these parents as terrorists.
Domestic terrorists.
Domestic terrorists. And so now the Justice Department is now in a little bit of hot water, trying to explain their own actions.
Right.
Parents aren't domestic terrorists, man. They love their kids.
Yeah.
And if we had more parents that loved their kids, we wouldn't have some of the problems that we have with our youth.
I could not agree more. And you know what? This story actually takes us into our next story because, if again, like I said, that father, you know, reacting like that, I think is understandable. So this next story, a man killed his daughter's boyfriend. And I'm not condoning killing by any means, but a man killed his daughter's boyfriend after he found out that the boyfriend sold her into a sex trafficking ring.
Yeah, you cover this one because this one is just, it's nutty.
Unbelievable.
For me. Yeah.
Yeah. So NBC reports that basically in Washington State, this man found out that his daughter was dating a 19-year-old boy and sold her into a sex trafficking ring. Well, probably almost a year later, basically last month in Spokane, the boyfriend was found in the trunk of an abandoned car, completely dead. Apparently he was hit with a cinder block, repeatedly stabbed.
Yeah.
The father's charged with first-degree murder. The father had found out that she was trafficked in the Seattle area back in October of 2020. He was apparently able to rescue her. My question is, how did he find out that information? But
well, this is another very sad story, but Sarah, I have to tell you, your father wouldn't kill the guy and put him in the trunk of a car. I think your father, my father, anyone's father, me, I think we would go to the authorities, we would report it, and we would make sure that he suffered the consequences of whatever the law stated. You're not going to be justified by killing a guy, hitting him over the head with a cinder block and putting him in your trunk.
Yeah, I don't approve of vigilante behavior for sure, but I understand probably what mentally went through his head when he found out.
I agree, but it doesn't justify the actions
of
that occurred, and now he's going to have to deal with this for the rest of his life.
Yep.
Versus, you know, if something like this happens in your life, go to the authorities. Report this.
Right.
Make sure that...
And maybe he did. We don't know. You know, there's a lot of the story we don't know. Maybe he did and nothing happened, or it was a slap on the wrist or what have you. Yeah, I'm not sure. You know, they didn't report that in any of the stories.
But as bad as what the boyfriend did, and it's horrific, it doesn't equal the father then killing the boyfriend. That doesn't equal that.
Right.
You know, if he took a gun right in front of the father and shot her in the head, and then his reflex actions were to take out a gun and shoot the guy, that's more understandable than this one.
Yeah.
This one, to me, is a terrible story with a very bad ending, but it's not justifiable.
Yeah, I see that. Our next story, speaking of guns, the Supreme Court heard arguments on New York's gun permit law this week. So NBC reports that the law requiring showing a special need to carry a permit for concealed handgun in public in New York. It's under scrutiny, that law. So basically, in New York, if you wanted to get the permit, you had to show that you had a special need or a special reason for needing the handgun. And the people who are fighting against this law that was ruled in 2008 are saying that you shouldn't need to show a specific need. it should be your right to be able to carry your handgun.
All right, I have a question.
Yeah.
You're the gun expert.
Okay.
So is this being set up by this crazy man de Blasio, or is this from the governor?
No, this is separately. This is from a separate lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah, who's bringing this up.
All right. So what they're basically trying to do now is limit your ability when you have a permit to carry.
Yeah, well, so people who are applying for permits, you have to prove why you're scared and need the gun, essentially.
Okay. And your opinion on that is?
That's absurd. I think that is completely ridiculous. It is your Second Amendment right to have a weapon. I mean, now I understand there's a part of it where the conversation was talking about in public places where there's a lot of people, like obviously Times Square, like certain places like this.
Well, you can't go into a bar with that.
Right. And I understand that there's certain places you shouldn't be able to carry, but in the state of New York, I mean, a lot of New York is rural. You're from upstate New York.
Yeah.
I grew up right around the area. A lot of it is not New York City, and I don't think people realize that. I mean, New York City is 13 miles top to bottom.
Yeah.
Manhattan is 13 miles top to bottom. So it's just, I think it's an absurd rule.
Yeah, and again, we get into these discussions about, guns in America. I have been very clear that I'm a Second Amendment guy to a point. Mm-hmm. A lot of the people that I know and people that I like believe that you should be able to own an automatic weapon if you want to own an automatic
I'm one
weapon.
Of those people.
I'm not.
Who believes that?
I don't believe that. Mm-hmm. I don't think that that's right. I think those are for military-related things, and they're not meant to go duck hunting. They're not meant to protect yourself in the house. There's a million ways to do that with a shotgun, a handgun, a single rifle, whatever. The automatic weapon thing bothers me because a lot of what I've seen in the automatic weapon world is guys killing people fast.
Yeah. Well, and I know we've talked about this before, but
you never paid attention to the buzzer.
I know. I was going to say, well, and I know we've talked about this before, but I mean, I think that first off, a couple of reasons why I think that having an automatic weapon is within your right, because first off, it's a slippery slope. If you start to deny, technically, even a handgun's a semi-automatic. I mean, it auto-loads. But I also think that when you break it down, the reason why people are supposed to be able to carry is so that the government can't decide to overthrow. And we see what's happened in Australia. I mean, we saw what happened when the shutdown happened, with coronavirus. We saw what happened with the mask mandates, with the vaccine mandates. I mean, we're seeing government put their hand in control over people, in control over small businesses, bodies, lives, everything. And the whole point of owning a gun is obviously, protection, but of course, again, to make sure that when martial law gets put into place, you aren't a victim to that without some way to defend yourself. Obviously, this didn't happen during the shutdown, but if the government came in and decided, okay, we're going to shut everything down and, life's going to go to chaos and collapse, you want to be able to defend yourself.
Yeah. Well, we just see, I see the issue differently. I'm a Second Amendment guy, no question.
Yeah.
Should never touch the Second Amendment, but there are provisions inside the Second Amendment as technology continues to produce these weapons of mass destruction. Does the public really need these weapons? So
yeah, we could go on and on in this.
All right.
Yeah. All right, our next conversation, masks in schools. An Arizona High Court upholds a ruling blocking school mask bans. So basically saying that school mask bans are allowed. They found the Republican-controlled legislature violated the state constitution by including new laws banning the school mask mandate. So my question to you is, do you think a mask is a parental decision, or should it be a school decision?
It's a hard one. I think, Sarah, that now that more and more people are getting vaccinated, I think some of the numbers are starting to come down a little bit. I think masks in certain situations are necessary. Mm-hmm. I've talked to a lot of teachers around the country because I really spent a lot of time on this on the first season because we were right in the middle of this COVID thing. And they were concerned about, their own health and welfare. And these were legitimate concerns. Do masks help the fact that, the spreading of this virus? I think it's proven that they do. the problem that you have and a lot of people have, and I do to a certain extent, is I think anytime something is mandated, it's a problem. That's my problem. The Democrats are too much on to mandates in general. I mean, I think that's accurate as it relates to you, right?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, absolutely. It shouldn't be a mandate. It should be up to the parent whether or not they want, in my opinion, whether or not they want to mask their child. And in theory, you know, I understand masks. You know, I understand the science behind it. I mean, flu season, if everyone wore masks, it would probably be a little safer for everyone. You know, just in the common cold, if you're walking around coughing on things at grocery store, picking up avocados, you know, I always test the avocados. But, you know, I think that, again, exactly it's the principle. The same thing is kind of what you're talking about with the mandates. I just don't believe that that should be put as a law.
Well, one side to what I would say to counter one thing that you said is that yes, the parents have to have a say so. They need to decide. But if you're a school administrator or you're a teacher, you look at it a little bit differently in that this child is coming into your classroom and you could become infected with the coronavirus. So from that standpoint, it's not as crystal clear as just the parents.
I agree, but at the same time, there are so many studies out there that talk about how masks do more harm than good to kids.
And every study that you have on that, I could show you one that says something completely different.
I was going to say, it depends what you Google, right? It depends like what words you actually type in, what articles are going to come up. So it's just, it's tough because both claim science is behind their claims, but I think, again, at the end of the day, mandates should not be in place like this.
Well, I'm against mandates.
Yes. All right, time now for Frank Unplugged.
All right. My Unplugged section today is really kind of a smorgasbord of a few things. If you watched the Unplugged last show, and I urge you to watch it, I talked a lot about the federal debt and the fact that our country is broke and we're never going to be able to pay it back. That's a fact. I mean, $29 trillion and counting, we can't even balance a budget. So it's just going to keep going and going and going till it hits an inflection point and interest rates rise and inflation rises. And all of a sudden, as I mentioned, that explosion you hear out your back door is going to be the U.S. economy blowing up. I'm going to get a little bit deeper into other aspects of that today. I mentioned last show that one of the great businessmen of all time, Ross Perot, who ran for the presidency in 1992, that was won by Bill Clinton, he received 20 million votes, more than any other independent before or since. He ran as an independent candidate. Said the debt is akin to the crazy ant who's in the cellar. And the crazy ant is down there. The neighbors know she's there, but nobody wants to do anything about it. That was his Perot-ism analogy of the national debt in 1992 when it was $4 trillion. Today it's $29 trillion. The progressives, in my opinion, you have to also understand my background and where I kind of come from this. I grew up in a household that were Kennedy Democrats, okay? And I grew up in a neighborhood that were Kennedy Democrats. Most of the Irish immigrants and Italian immigrants and people that were in upstate New York, they loved John Kennedy, especially if you were a Catholic, okay? We get to Bill Clinton, and you take a look at Bill Clinton, and people love Bill Clinton because he was a centrist. He was a moderate Democrat that saw, in people's opinion, all sides of the equation as it related to the fiscal responsibility, okay, that you have in governing, and the moral responsibility that you have. Bill Clinton was probably the greatest example of that. As I mentioned last show again, he's the only president in modern times that for a year or two was able to actually not only balance the budget, but create a surplus. What does that mean? Spend less than what you take in, which we haven't done in so long, it's not even funny. But the progressives have taken over the Democratic Party. And on Tuesday, they got sent a message. And people are not interested in that level of politics. They're not. I'm not. No one really is. If you're looking for handouts, you're in the wrong country, okay? This is a place where you come and you try to live the American dream. Now, if you're thwarted from your ability to live the American dream because of the color of your skin, because of your background, because of your religion, then shame on anybody that's allowing that to happen. But this is a country that is a capitalist society that ultimately has to be based on hard work and income, okay? Now, I have said over and over and over that there are social programs that are in the current construct that I'm all for, because some people need the help and can't help themselves. But that's not what we're seeing today. We're seeing people with their hands out, and we're seeing politicians that are these progressive Democrats that ultimately want to just print money and hand money out that we don't have. Not one of them understands what I'm talking about when I talk about the national debt and what the ramifications of that are going to be. Cori Bush from Missouri, a squad member. What's the squad? Led by AOC, Ilhan Omar, that group, okay? That have garnered, for some reason, so much attention in this country, it's unbelievable. She characterized Joe Manchin, who's the senator from West Virginia, that basically is trying to use common sense to try to figure out this social spending bill and what's going on. For lack of support, she chastised him for lack of support on the social spending bill, saying that his lack of support is, quote now, I'm quoting her, anti-black, anti-child, anti-women, anti-immigrant. This is the world that we're living in today. If you don't agree with the people on the far left, all they really do is just come after you and start saying things that are completely irrelevant. Joe Manchin is not anti any of those things. Comes from West Virginia. He's a Democrat, okay? He comes from a relatively conservative red state, but I think that he is a combination between being socially responsible and being fiscally responsible. This is what we're lacking here. We don't have the money anymore. So how do you pay for it, Cori? If all of this is true what you say, how do you not only pay for this now $1.75 trillion bill, how do you pay back the $29 trillion and counting? And I'm going to get to a whole nother subject that nobody talks about. This is 6 crazy ants in the closet, okay? If the deficit is 1 crazy ant in the basement, this is 6 in the closet. Nancy Pelosi decides today, and we covered this earlier, she's going to add 4 weeks of paid family and medical leave back into a bill that already is so expensive that we can't pay for it. And you have to wonder, you know, what is she really thinking? You know, what is the Speaker of the House really thinking? Okay? I covered the $29 trillion, as I mentioned, in the last Unplugged. It doesn't even account for a gigantic major issue that I'm going to talk to you about here. And again, I could do 7 shows on this. I'm going to try to do it in 30 seconds. It's the unfunded government liabilities as it relates to Social Security and Medicare. These numbers dwarf our national debt. They're about $100 trillion. And these are the unfunded portions to the Social Security, and this is everywhere, okay? This is everywhere. This isn't made up by me. This is out there for anybody that wants to read about it. It's $100 trillion the government owes, where it's promised its citizens without the funds to fulfill its obligations. Social Security, Medicare, Parts A, B, and D. And according to the Treasury Department, now this isn't me, this is the Treasury Department, the U.S. unfunded liability includes everything that I just mentioned. This is out of the Treasury Department, Social Security and Medicare. plus veterans benefits that have been promised to these people. How are we going to pay for it? How is this going to be handled? Who's talking about this? Who is going to be the reporter that takes this on, Sarah?
I don't know, and I hope someone does take it on, because this is stuff that a lot of people don't talk about, unfortunately, that people don't understand even.
I'll tell you what they do understand. They understand the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has ruined Kennedy and Obama and Bill Clinton's party. They've ruined it.
Yep.
Okay? So it's going to be up to the Democrats now. Is this the road you want to go down? You were sent a very strong message. Nancy Pelosi is tone deaf.
Yep.
Okay, if she had any sense about things at all, she wouldn't be doing what she's doing yesterday.
But she's getting pressure from half of her own party.
Yeah, but my point is, I don't care who it is.
Yeah.
It's either right or wrong.
Right.
And let me just say, I'm not trying to suggest that we should deprive people who need help of the help.
Right.
But we got to be able to pay for it. It's got to be done in a manner, and they all say this now. I get back to this, Sarah. You've heard this. These programs are paid for.
They're not.
They don't tell you how they're paid for, but you got to remember, I'm old enough now that I remember all of this for 20, 30 years. Well, they're paid for. Well, then how the hell does the debt go up from $4 trillion in 1992, Ross Perot Sr.'s presidential run, to $29 trillion? Forgetting about, you understand these social programs now, these Medicare and Medicaid and veterans benefits and Social Security? Do you understand that those have to be funded?
Yep, everything.
I read the other day that in Social Security, if they don't do something, they're going to have to start cutting benefits by 2034. That's 22. That's 12 years from now.
Wow.
Okay, that's what they're projecting now. Okay, but you know what this is? You've heard the expression "kick the can down the road."
Right.
Nobody wants to talk about this.
Right.
Nobody. Our country's broke, ladies and gentlemen. We're broke. And we're talking about social spending bills, and we're talking about all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody has got to take a microphone and put it in Chuck Schumer's face and Joe Biden's face, and not let him get away with, well, this is paid for. This bill's paid for.
Well, and look how cheap it is. It's $1.9 trillion.
Let's assume it's paid for.
Yeah.
Which is a huge assumption. What are you going to do on the $29 trillion and the $1 trillion plus a year in deficits? What are you doing about that? Because that's going to be the cord that chokes the economy here.
Right.
It's going to choke us off.
Yep.
And then you have these unfunded things. I had a friend of mine who's a great guy, my old college roommate, who's in the wealth management business. And I had him calculate and tell me treasury bills and what the yield on treasury bills are. You buy treasury bills because that's part of the bonds that you buy that fund all this stuff.
Right.
What's the yield on a 10-year treasury? Can you believe that it was less than 1% and now it's 1.5% for a 5 or 10, a 10-year treasury? A 10-year treasury. There's no return to any of this. Right. Why would you loan money to an economy that's running at 125% ratio now? Remember the ratios?
Yep.
GDP to debt.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? How could, I mean, this just shows that the country is artificially pushing down these interest rates because, God forbid, if they went up, that's the explosion out the back door. And I'll end with this. The stock market's going crazy. Nobody that I talk to now, smarter people way than me, can figure this out. You know, the S&P's trading at 23, 24 times earnings. Somebody needs to get a coloring book and come in here and explain to me what the hell's going on. I can't figure it out.
And if you can't figure it out, and people who
way smarter than me,
way smarter than you can't figure it out, I mean, that's a problem.
Well, and you just got to wonder, you know, what road are we going down? Yeah. So in closing of this, and you get to your headlines, getting back to this, everyone, there is so much financial turbulence that's out there that we ignore every day. When I see these social spending bills coming down the pike and you hear all these people that couldn't add this up if their life depended on it. Well, this is only $1.75 trillion and we've come down and we've done this. I mean, you almost can't watch the TV anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the American people are getting sick of it. I really do.
I think so.
Let's help the people that need the help in the existing programs that we have. But we got to figure out, if they made me president for a week, the first order of business for me would be to get a balanced budget amendment passed and stick to it. Because we can't continue to borrow money like this.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
But somehow it's going to be racist, anti-immigration, anti-women.
Anti-women, anti-immigrant.
Anti-everything. Cancel culture is alive and well.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Frank. Time for headlines. All right, Election Day was this week, and Phil Murphy was reelected as governor in New Jersey, and the AP reports he's the first Democratic governor to get a second straight term in New Jersey in 44 years. This comes after Glenn Youngkin defeated Terry McAuliffe in Virginia's gubernatorial race. Youngkin was the first Republican to win statewide office in 12 years. These elections were expected to set the pace for the voter sentiments since Biden became president and generally tell the tale for the future. Both races were extremely close. And additionally, some exciting news. The Virginia Lieutenant Governor-elect Winsome Sears becomes the first female and woman of color to hold the office. Sears was born in Jamaica and served as a Marine in the United States military. And the Supreme Court heard arguments on New York's gun permit law this week. NBC reports the law requiring showing a special need to get a permit for carrying a concealed handgun in public in New York is under scrutiny. Supreme Court justices leaned more towards the side of the Constitution providing a right to people to carry the gun outside the home, but said that there does need to be restrictions in crowded places. The last time the ruling was reviewed was in 2008, and the court will decide on this issue by June. And more news out of Virginia. Monday, a juvenile court judge found a transgender teen guilty of sexually assaulting a female in the Loudoun County High School in May. The National Review reports the victim's father said the biological male student, while wearing a skirt, forcibly sodomized his 9th grade daughter in the girls' restroom. This comes after a, quote, gender inclusivity policy went into place this year, allowing students to use the bathroom for which they identify. The father was speaking out at a local school board meeting and was arrested for disorderly conduct after conversations heated during a protest, and the school was accused of covering up the assault. Prior to this ruling, the transgender student was transferred to another school where a similar incident occurred. And ending on some good news, that's if you're a Braves fan. They have done it. They won the World Series, and the parade is about to begin tomorrow in Atlanta. They beat the Astros Tuesday 7-0 in Game 6 in the best-of-a-7 series, which they won 4-2. It's the first time they've won since moving to Atlanta. Last time they won was in '95.
Well, I think they've been in Atlanta earlier than '95.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the last time they won was in '95.
In '95, yeah, because they moved out of Milwaukee. That was back in the old Hank Aaron days.
Are you a Braves fan?
No.
No.
No, but I mean,
Yankees?
No. If the Yankees played the Iranians, I'd root for the Iranians. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, sports is some levity for us here. Yeah. You know, when you cover the news like we're doing here, Sarah, and I think people at home get a feel for this as they watch their televisions, it's really a lot of bad news.
It is. It's tough.
There's not a lot of good news. And I have to be honest, at the end of these shows, I'm a little spent because, you know, you really go through this stuff and you'd like to cover more positive things, but there just isn't anything out there right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I remember I was watching the news one day and my husband kind of walked by and he's like, man, this is all so depressing. And as a news person, as a reporter, as a journalist, as someone who's, you know, an avid news watcher, I mean, it starts to weigh on you. But it is to educate the public. And sometimes I think in my head, I'm like, is worse stuff happening? Or are people just finding out more? You know, is social media readily available? Everyone has a video camera, everyone has a photo, everyone's online. Are we just learning more?
I think it's a combo platter.
Okay.
I think that the country and the world are not in great shape.
Yeah.
But I think it's a combo platter. So anyways, well, that's Thursday's show, everybody. And we're really excited to have done this show. And Sarah, tell them one more time before we sign off on how they get to the show.
Yeah. So on Facebook, at To Be Frank Show. And then, of course, you can type in the To Be Frank Show on YouTube to find us. And then online as well, tobefrankshow.com. And then, of course, on all of your streaming services, Spotify, iHeart Radio, Google Play, Apple iPod, anywhere that you listen to your podcast.
Yeah. Well, tell your friends about it. That's Thursday's edition. We'll be back with you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Be safe. Take care of your families. Spend some time with your families. And we'll see you on Thursday.
All right.
Or I'll see you on Monday. Monday.
Have a good weekend.